fucking mandate that could defeat Donald Trump. How is that even possible? I, for one, am shocked. Shocked, I tell you. What a shocking revelation. Hold on. Let's figure out which camera is the right one. Okay. All right. I'm now going to be talking to Professor Jiang, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on. Hello, Professor Jiang. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wow. Okay. What an honor. What an honor to have you
Oh, no,
here.
it's
A
a pleasure.
big time fan, first time listener. That's what we say in radio, which this is not. Hold on. I'm gonna fix. I'm doing a real time live production right now, so it's going to take a little bit
No worries.
to size you up, to fix you up on the screen. But I
Okay.
know that you are now also doing live broadcasts because I saw you talk about, the trials of trying to communicate to an audience in real time and how difficult it is. So now,
Yeah.
we're one and the
You need about
same.
4 brains. Yeah, you need
What?
about 4 brains to do. You need about 4 brains to do it properly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's the ADHD that I have. For your title, what would you like?
You can just call me Jiang if you want.
Okay, I'm going to say Professor Jiang, and then I'm going to
Okay.
say future predictor, predictive history.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. So, Professor Jiang, you have been on the broadcast of numerous academics and also Sneeko, uh, who is not
Sure,
necessarily
Sneeko
an
as well, yes.
academic, but
Right, right.
but you've had conversations with the likes of Dugan and many others. Very excited to have you here. You did an interview with Breaking Points. Longtime fan of your work. Let's get right into it. What's the next prediction? What's coming up?
Um, my next prediction, my big prediction is that I think Trump will get a third term.
Okay, that's a little
Yeah.
wild. All right. What makes you say that?
Well, first of all, he and his family have been stealing billions of dollars. That's a lot of corruption, and it's really unprecedented. So if he were to leave the office in 2028, you would imagine the first thing that any new administration would do is conduct an investigation because it'd be very popular among the American people. I also live in China, so I know how these things work. Basically, when someone gets in office and he's behaving like a tyrant, it usually means he's a tyrant. And it usually means he has no intention of ever leaving office. So I think that given his behavior, I think Trump is intent on a third term. Uh, so then the question then is, would he get a third term? And when Zelensky visited the White House, there was a White House gaggle, and basically, the reporter asked Zelensky, "Hey, why haven't you had an election for the past, 4 years? And you should be out of office." And Zelensky is like, "Well, we're at war, so we suspend the Constitution." And Trump was like, "Wait, you can do that?" And then Zelensky was like, "You like that, don't you?" And yeah, that's what he might do. He could also run as a VP and have his son, Don Jr., at the head of the ticket. And then when he wins, when they win by cheating, they can, his son can abdicate and he can be the president again.
So there's one
Um,
complication there. It's actually
right?
unconstitutional for him to be the vice president. Like right now, Barack Obama couldn't run as a vice president because he's already carried out his 2 terms. Because
That is
so
that is up to the
there's a there's a constitutional hurdle there, but maybe he can climb it. I don't know.
that is up to debate because if you talk to any law professor, he or she will tell you that it is unconstitutional. It violates the spirit of the Constitution. But the problem with the Constitution is it doesn't state explicitly that you can't do that. Because what the Constitution says is that no vice president shall be elected, but the vice president is not elected. He's part of the ticket. So it's ultimately up to the Supreme Court to decide what this Constitution says, right? So
Yeah.
I would debate that they will take this to the Supreme Court.
Well, yeah. I mean, the vice president has the same qualifications as the president. Like, vice president also has to be like over the age of 35, for example. Like, you can't have like a 30-year-old VP on the ticket.
That is the
But
spirit of the
but then
Constitution.
again, who knows? This
That's the
is
spirit of the Constitution. I agree
yeah.
with you. And all our professors will tell the same thing. But again, it's not in the letter. It's not explicit. And so they can take to the Supreme Court. And ultimately, 3 of the 9 justices were appointed by Trump. He'll probably get another one by the end of this year, possibly next year. So there'll be 4 appointed by Trump when this case goes to Supreme Court. But it'll be great for us because it'll be Barack Obama versus Donald Trump in 2028.
Okay, you said us. You're in the tank for the Democrats. Is that what it is? Am I getting that right?
No, I know. What I meant. Of course I'm being ironic. What I meant is like just a general spectator.
No.
It'll be
Okay.
like it'll be like the WWE, right? The main event,
Okay.
the greatest clash in American politics. Barack Obama versus Donald Trump. Donald Trump's been waiting for this ever since what 20. When did he go to the White House correspondence dinner and Barack Obama made fun of him? I mean, he's been
It's like
relishing this moment for a long, long time.
2015, 2014, maybe.
Yeah. No, he's been relishing this moment for a long time.
They're saying 2011 in my chat. Professor Jiang, is it possible to raise your volume on your end? I tried to do it on mine, but it's already maxed out just a little bit from your microphone.
Sorry,
because you're a little bit quiet.
Sorry. I'll put my mic closer to my. Yeah. All right.
There's no way to
better?
crank up the volume on your end through the Zoom, maybe.
Yeah. Let me try. Okay. All right. Right.
It sounds fine, is what chatters are saying now, but it's crazy because, and I'm sure you've already gotten a little taste of this when you were also live. They always complain. You know what I mean? They always complain, and then they're like, and then they complain nevertheless, even when you fix it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. So, is this better now?
It's a little bit better. I'll just lower my own volume to adjust it to yours, so that people can, people can lower their volume or increase their volume. I think we should be good this way. All right. So getting back to it, so you're famous for your predictions. You use game theory. A lot of people have called you out on it. I don't fully understand how game theory factors into your predictions.
Sure.
Do you mind elaborating on how game theory factors into your predictions on geopolitical events?
Right. So my big thing is that the world is a game, and we can treat nation states as players in this game, and each nation state has a distinct personality, determined by its geography and by its history. And this distinct personality determines how it interacts with the world. So, for example, the United States is particularly aggressive. China is not aggressive, and ultimately, each player is going to engage in its optimal strategy, right? So rather than like look at what people say, look at what people do, just think about like if this game were to continue, what is the optimal strategy? And then the player would adapt this optimal strategy over time, right? So if you were to go back, 2 years ago, and you were to survey American politicians and Donald Trump, would you go invade Iran? They'd be like, of course not. That's insane. Why would we do that? But they end up invading Iran because it is at this point in American history the optimal strategy in order to maintain American hegemony around the world. So that's a brief introduction to game theory.
Okay, so part of that equation in your assessment, because you correctly predicted that Trump's going to win the election. There were some incorrect predictions in there. I believe you said Nikki Haley could potentially be Trump's vice president, but then you also landed on JD Vance as well. There was one thing that stuck with me though, where you said that America was going to go up the escalation ladder with Iran. America was going to lose the war to Iran, but in the process of doing so, that there would be troop movements that from the rest of the region would join in on this battle and
Yes.
militarily invade Iran. Boots on the
Yes.
ground military warfare. Part of that, you said Saudi Arabia would amass 200,000 plus troops.
Yeah.
Where, if you don't mind me asking, where did you get that number? Because I remember looking up the number of troops that the Saudi government has, and as far as like combat troops, it was nowhere near 200,000. Which,
Right.
of course,
Well,
I don't even think Saudis would ever allow Saudi nationals to go and wage war, as they were thoroughly defeated militarily in Yemen by the much smaller, much more ascetic band of troops backed by Iran, the Ansar Allah movement, the Houthis.
okay. So to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't do thorough research when I came up with these numbers. When I give lectures, I'm trying to create a narrative that sort of captures the essence of what's happening. And so my larger argument is that America will go in a coalition, and this coalition will make up the bulk of its invasion force. And we're already seeing this transpire where there's a crackdown in Iraq. And so what a lot of people believe is that the prime minister is trying to crack down on the Shia militias in order to pave the ground for a invasion from Iraq, right? And if that were the case, then you can see Iraqi militiamen joining in. You can see the Kurds joining in as well. So my larger point is that it'd be a broad coalition with the Americans providing aerial support and special forces and intelligence and command and control. But the bulk of the invasion force would be multinational. And you could also see some Japanese and Korean forces in there as well.
Wow, you think Japanese and Korean forces would also participate in a ground invasion of Iran?
Well, it's in the benefit of America to make it as international as possible. And ultimately, if the Strait of Hormuz were to continue to be closed, then South Korea and Japanese economies would tank, right? So they have a vested interest in sending forces. They may not send a lot, but again, I think Trump would be very interested in having this as broad a coalition as possible, just for domestic political purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the Japanese self-defense forces, especially considering that that's like definitely a bridge too far for many, even in Japanese society. As far as I understand Japanese politics, I mean, they don't really have a real military. I mean, it's unconstitutional for them to even have a military technically.
They
And what?
have Sorry, they have the best blue water navy in East Asia. I can see them sending ships to the Strait of Hormuz to support the attack. And also, right now, Japan is rewriting the constitution, and they are remilitarizing because they recognize that as the United States retreats from East Asia, then they need to basically be able to defend themselves against Chinese aggression.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind me asking. So you live in
Sure,
Beijing,
sure.
but you're on the
Yeah,
English side of the internet. So, and I've been to Beijing. I don't know if you're aware. I've been to China. It was quite the
yep,
controversial trip, as a matter of fact, because I don't have, unlike many Americans, I don't have an immediate hostility towards China. I think it's just another country existing in the world. And as you also correctly pointed out, they don't have a lot of inherent hostility towards other countries in general.
sure.
They exercise their self interest, and their self interest revolves around maintaining stability around the world. And even simply saying that out loud and correctly pointing to that is seen as an unforgivable sin here in the United States of America. But I want to hear about your perspective on China a little bit, given as you're someone who went to college here in the United States of America, I believe, right? You went to Yale,
Yeah, I
right?
was at Yale.
Yeah,
Yes,
you went to
unfortunately,
Yale.
yes.
You had an English degree from Yale, and then you also you worked as a journalist in China for a little bit, and then there was a little bit of controversy. I think you were working. I mean, this is just off your Wikipedia page. You can elaborate. There was you were working with a American outlet, I think, or an
Yeah,
international or Western
PBS.
outlet.
Yeah, PBS.
Oh, you were working with
Yeah.
PBS. Okay, cool. And then and what was that about?
Yeah, so I was working as a freelance journalist for the first couple of years. I was in China, and I was working for the Chronicle of Education, um, Asia Week, some American publications. And then PBS came into town, and this was a time when China was applying to join the WTO, the World Trade Organization.
Uh huh.
And there were a lot of worker protests around the country due to the restructuring of the state-owned enterprise system, right? A lot of people were losing their pensions, a lot of people were losing their livelihoods. And so they sent me to the northeast of China, a place called Dating, to film a worker protest. And the moment I arrived, I was arrested because there were a lot there, as you know, in China, there's a huge police presence everywhere. Like lots of plainclothesmen, a lot of spies. So I was arrested the moment I was there, and I was put in a hotel for 48 hours. And I was interrogated, and I was forced to sign a confession saying that I was working illegally in China as a journalist, which I was. I was working in China illegally as a journalist at the time here. And so
Sorry.
why is that funny?
I just like that you're so honest about it. Or you're like,
Yeah, no.
you're like,
It's illegal to work in China as a journalist. And then I was deported, but I was not charged with a crime. There's a difference, right? So I
uh-huh.
was deported, and I was allowed back in the country anytime I wanted. But they wanted to deport me in order because I mean, like you can imagine when a journalist gets arrested in China, like when you got stopped at Tiananmen Square, that's big international news, right?
Yeah.
So
I
they
mean, even when I
journalists,
got detained for like 3 seconds at Tiananmen
that's
Square, that
exactly,
was all over Western newspapers. They're like, "Oh, the communists have arrested him." I mean, it wasn't, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, they said you can come back anytime, but we have to deport you because you're getting too much attention. And so, and so after a year, I was trying to write a book, didn't really work out, and I was trying multiple uh, possibilities, but then I ended up going back to China to do documentary filmmaking. And then I worked in the United Nations of Afghanistan, and then after that, I started to work in education reform in China. I built a couple of schools in China that were pretty successful, and then I got fired because I'm a tyrant. I have a certain way of doing things. I have a certain way of educating students, and it didn't really align with Chinese culture and Chinese tradition. I want to teach critical thinking. I want to teach the Socratic method, and they just wanted kids to get into Yale and Harvard. And I was doing that, but they didn't want the education reform, and so I was fired from my position. I wandered around China for the next 10 years before I met my wife, and that's what really changed my life. After I met my wife, we had 3 kids, and so I needed stability in my life, and so I started to go work at a private school, and that's when I started to film my lectures. So I was teaching both geopolitics, game theory, as well as great books, Homer, Dante, Plato, and that's what made me popular online.
I've seen the videos. So the videos that you have on the internet, you actually have students in the room with you. Like that's a lecture
Yeah,
from high school. I
one,
assume
but
is it high school?
it's a high school, and I have like one student in the class. Yes,
You have
as
one
many,
student.
sometimes two. You know,
Okay.
sometimes if I get lucky, I get two. But yeah, usually one student in the classroom. Yes.
And what's the like I've looked into the website a little bit and I feel like it's one of those schools where it's like the goal is to try to get these kids to like American college, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah. So we are a private school. I've left the school, by the way.
Oh, you
But
have. Okay.
uh, I have left the school to pursue other possibilities. But it's a private school. It's trying to get Chinese kids into American schools, American colleges. But as you can appreciate, a lot of these kids are there because they failed out of the Chinese public school
Yeah.
system. The Chinese public school system is very, very rigorous. It's intense, and a lot of kids, I would say the vast majority of kids, flunk out because they develop a lot of depression, they develop psychological issues, and with like rich dumb kids.
Yeah. That's what a lot of Americans don't realize this, but yes, the children of rich kids in other countries with like a public education system oftentimes will send as a secondary option their children to private school in America because it's much harder to get into the best schools, the top schools in China. Same thing with Turkey as well. I'm a
Sure.
dumb rich kid who had to go to private school in high school because I couldn't get into any of the good schools because I didn't fail, but it's just like I wasn't competitive enough in eighth grade in my test results.
Yeah,
And
and the grind starts at like age 2 or 1. It's crazy what the parents will do to make sure their kid succeeds on the national entrance examination. I mean, like these kids are doing cram school at age 3 or 4. They're learning math, they're learning vocabulary, they're doing a lot of sports, just swimming. I have 3 kids, and it's impossible for us to raise a family because our kids can't find any friends. Everyone's too busy studying, and we are very progressive with our kids. We want them to be happy. And so all other parents look at us and think we're like, just serial killers, like cannibals. Like how could you do this to your child? Don't you know, like at age 6 or 7, your child's future is already determined? Are you happy with your child being, like a drug addict for the rest of his life? We get a lot of stares, and people talk about us behind our backs all the time.
that's wild. But so what's your plan then? Are you planning on bringing them to the West, or are you planning on raising them in Beijing?
Yeah, so my long-term plan is to start foundation schools around the world and I want to promote a new model of education. And there'll be 3 major pillars to this new model of education, and they are great books. I think that in the digital age, it's now the most important thing to read books, especially the great books, right? Homer, Dante, Plato, Shakespeare. The second pillar is game theory, like teaching you how to understand geopolitics, how to understand current events, and understand the social forces that determine these events. And the third is their cult, religion, right? So I'm interested in teaching the Kabbalah. I'm interested in teaching Sufism, Vedic philosophy, Taoist philosophy, because I feel that if you really want to understand the world, you need to understand religion, because the reality is that most people are religious and people take their religion seriously. And I think that it's very hard to understand what's happening in the Middle East unless you look at it from an eschatological lens. Unless you appreciate that there are crazies in the American government, be like Peter Hegseth, who believe they're actually crusaders, that they are gonna go and bring in the second coming of Jesus. A lot of these Zionists are driven by end times eschatology as well. They really believe that they are going to build the third temple, and this is going to bring back sorry, not bring back, but like usher in the coming of the Messiah, and then God will bring heaven to earth. They all believe this. And unless you really appreciate this, it's very hard to understand how the world works.
I mean, I believe in dialectical materialism. So my understanding of the world revolves around, in some ways, it's not dissimilar to game theory, self interest on the basis of class, and how societies are organized around the means of production, and everything is downstream from that. But I do think that there are some, spiritual and ideological ways of thinking that might lead people astray. But I think ultimately is still, is still the self interest of the capital owning class. But it seems like you were not a believer in Marxist theory or Marxist thought at all.
I'm sympathetic. If you actually research Kabbalah, you would appreciate that dialectic materialism comes from the Kabbalah, right? So if you look at Marx and his genealogy, both his maternal and paternal sides of the family, they come from several generations of rabbis. The guy's an aristocrat. Like just go and look at his Wikipedia page. He comes from like
He is Jewish, but he's also very critical of religion in general. And I do feel like the philosophical basis comes from Hegel and not Kabbalah. But maybe I misunderstood
right,
it.
right. So I mean, my first point is that you're still influenced by your environment, right? I mean, if your parents, your grandparents are talking about Kabbalah every single day, you could reject that, but it's still going to influence how you perceive the world. That's point one. And then point two is that um, the Kabbalah infiltrated the larger milieu, the zeitgeist of the times, and so I think it's very hard to understand that materialism and communism without thinking about the Kabbalah. That's my experience. This is something we can go deeper into. And I can show you a lot of similarities between dialectic materialism and Kabbalah. So
I
I
would
mean,
love to
but the
hear
most
more about that actually, because I
right.
feel like it's
So
what you're describing is like almost foundationally
yes,
diametrically opposed to my understanding of materialist thought, especially when paired with the concept of dialectics, which is to disavow the spiritual. Which Hegel's dialectics, yes, was more so about the spirit of certain things, whereas like materialism is all about the real world, simply put.
right. Okay. So have you looked at the tree of life?
I
The tree of life.
know what is the tree of life. I mean,
Okay.
I think I know
So
what that is, but I don't know.
right. Okay. So the tree of life is what Kabbalists believe to be the fundamental underlying logic of the universe. Basically, how God thinks, basically how the universe moves, right? So in their understanding, the universe is energy. And this energy has a certain vibration that it moves. And what the tree of life shows you is how this universe moves. And you actually study the tree of life. What it is fundamentally is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Okay, so
Uh-huh.
the idea is like everything produces a polarity, and then this polarity in itself combines to create a new force, which then creates a new polarity. And that's dialectic materialism, right? Marx's great innovation is to say, okay, I'm going to take this idea and apply it to
I mean, it's
economics.
dialectics, yeah, but
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's materialism, but
right,
okay, go no, go on. I shouldn't have stopped you. You're
right, right, right,
lecturing.
right. Right. No, no, but I'm saying that's what the tree of life teaches you. Like the
Uh-huh.
fundamental force of the universe is the thesis, antithesis, synthesis dynamic, right? And you can also say this as the generative force, productive force, and then creation. And what Marx, and again, Marx's great innovation is to recognize that, okay, the priority then is economics, okay? And that's how he came up with that, like materialism. And before, people appreciate it as maybe thought or religion. And Marx says, no, we can simplify it by prioritizing class differences.
Okay. Um, okay. I still don't fully understand how that is similar, but maybe I just don't have the brain power to comprehend it. But okay, so what's your spiritual analysis then? Because you said everybody believes something, right? Like everybody has like
Yeah,
some kind of spiritual understanding of the world, some kind of religious worldview. What would you say yours is?
right. So, you know, 4 years ago, I was a very happy atheist. I was like you. I was probably more sympathetic to Marx than anyone else. I really believe in dialectic materialism.
Wait, that was 4 years
Um,
ago, you
yeah,
said?
4 years ago. 4 years
Okay.
ago. And then these past 4 years, as I'm teaching history, as I'm teaching the great books, as I'm seeing how uh, things unfold in the world, I have this crisis of faith. And so when I'm looking at what's happening in Iran, I can't explain it simply using game theory. I can't explain it just using, geopolitics. I think there's something much larger going on. I still don't know why Donald Trump attacked Iran. Do you know why? Because he's never really articulated a good reason why he decided to go and attack um, Iran.
Why do I think
So
he attacked Iran?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that the axis of resistance was at its weakest point in the aftermath of 3 years of genocide, and that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government was able to make a convincing case to to finally strike at Iran, something that like uh, numerous American administrations have said no to. And then he believed foolishly that a regime decapitation would actually create ample ground for regime change. With the Kurdish militias on the ground, foment sectarian conflict, things of that nature. Of course, it didn't happen. I think Benjamin Netanyahu probably utilized the Venezuela victory as well to his advantage. And outside of that, I think ultimately he wanted to, one, disrupt the global world, the global energy supply coming out of the Gulf, because the Gulf is already far
Yeah.
too close to China, America's only, I think, at this point, geopolitical enemy. And they wanted to. I mean, Trump has been doing this already. He wanted to decouple the rest of the world from China. It failed, obviously, with his tariffs, with his Liberation Day tariffs proposals. And then outside of that, I think he wanted to maintain the world's largest known natural oil supplies in Venezuela, which he did. And then he turned around. He turned around and thought he could then either disrupt the Gulf's energy development and increase the rest of the world's over reliance on American refined oil, or rather destabilize Iran and then control Iran so that he would no longer have to worry about the rest of the Gulf potentially aligning with China in any meaningful capacity, which could have created a leverage point for China and would have probably hardened China's position. They're already very clearly aligned with Russia. That's one major energy provider for them. And they still obviously need oil and gas, whereas they are already in control of the next, they have monopoly control over the next wave of the world's energy supply, the green energy, renewable energy.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And if like Barack Obama were president, I would agree with your analysis. We're talking about Donald Trump, right? So the thing about Donald Trump is, in his first term, they tried really hard to debrief him. Like, there was the presidential daily briefing, and they recognized this guy doesn't actually read. So at first they tried a paragraph, like, like instead of one pager, let's give him a paragraph. And it was impossible to focus his attention. He just did not care. So then they were like, okay, like we'll do bullet points, okay? Didn't work either. They're like, okay, we'll draw pictures, and like, didn't work either, okay? Even if you drew pictures for him, he could not keep focus. He could not absorb what you were telling him about geopolitics. And then they recognized the only way to get his attention was to appear on Fox News and tell him the message there. Okay, so this is a guy who has problems paying attention, who has problems being consistent, who has problems putting together coherent thought. So I think he's very emotional. I think he's very instinctual. He believes his own intuition. So I've again, I have a hard time believing that he actually thought it out.
I don't think he did. I think that
Okay.
there are people around him that some he trusts clearly that are manipulating him. They're goading him into taking certain actions. But it's like Joe Biden. Joe Biden was far too old to be making any kind of decisions. It was most likely the team around him that were making these decisions and moving him along. George W. Bush famously wasn't, very well put together, but they were just simply signing off on a lot of these things. But I think the people around him were most likely convinced that this was a decent plan of action, which it of course it wasn't. And they had to push back the Chinese summit once. And then when Donald Trump inevitably appeared alongside Xi Jinping in the China summit, because he had to, it was clear that he did not have any leverage. As a matter of fact, he was bargaining from a position of weakness when he went there. And that's part of the reason why he went back on $14 billion arms transfer to Taiwan, which went against like previous American foreign policy, and probably played a major role in normalizing relations across the strait. But again, that's because he lost. But you said there was a spiritual reason that like you saw you saw Trump moving against Iran, and that like
Yeah.
caused your spiritual awakening. So how did that happen?
Right. Okay. So it was a series of events. Okay. But my first great epiphany was when I was teaching Dante, the Divine Comedy. And it was my first time reading Divine Comedy. And it took me a long time to try to appreciate its beauty, its truth. But when I did, I recognized that this could not have been written by a human being. It is just so beautiful, so perfect, and it revealed a deeper truth. And my only conclusion is this was not written by a human being out of his own free will, out of his own experience. A lot of things I felt he was channeling God. I felt he was channeling the universe, and then um, explaining the truth in poetry. And so the Divine Comedy, what it tells us is that there are two worlds. There's the material world in which we live, and then there's a spiritual world in which our consciousness inhabits. So think of our consciousness as inhabiting infinite dimensions. And our consciousness is able to access the entire universe if we train our consciousness to meditate, to focus, to be ever present. And once we do that, then great truths revealed to us. And I look deeper into this and I recognize that this is what every single great religious and spiritual tradition has taught before, that ultimately we are part of the divine, that God is in us and that we are in God. And as I continue to study more and more history, I recognize that most humans throughout most of human history have believed this, and they've structured societies around us. Our 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 world is unique in that we are completely materialistic, and that we deny the existence of God, that we deny the existence of the soul, of consciousness. In neuroscience, no one has actually spent any research into the nature of our consciousness, and that's kind of weird because we spend most of our time thinking, right? So, like, why haven't we looked into where our thoughts come from, how we structure our thoughts, and how we communicate our ideas? So, the Divine Comedy was a great awakening, and then, like, as I studied history, I recognize a great paradox in our history, which is scientists know that our minds, the way that our minds are structured with the frontal lobe, um, our minds have been this way for the past 200,000 years, but we only have like 10,000 years of recorded history. So what were we doing before the Ice Age? Like were we just like, in caves freezing to death or running around chasing monkeys? Like what were we doing for 300,000 years? And then you look at places like Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey. You look at places like the Amazon forest, the Grand Valley in the United States. There's so much evidence of previous civilizations in these places before, and so I don't know how much of our history is real. So these past 4 years, I've been on a journey, and also, um, I've been looking into certain conspiracy theories, like such as a moon landing, such as JFK, such as 9/11, and the evidence is kind of overwhelming. I
The
like
overwhelming
I
in
know
what
it's not true.
direction? That it's just
In
fake.
in that in yeah, and the government is covering things up, right? I mean, like just look at 9/11, you just Google World Trade Center building number 7. You're like, oh, wait a minute here. Um, I thought two buildings came down, right? Because there were two planes, but
Mm-hmm.
three buildings came down that day. So how did that
Mm-hmm.
happen? Right? And like the moon landing. Oh, okay, we got to the moon, but apparently we lost all the technology. We lost all the data, the telemetry data, and we lost all the footage. So I'm like, oh, how did that happen? Like you have this huge bureaucratic organization, and they
So
lost all the technology.
so
Yeah.
what do you think is going on? Like you think they just like faked all of it? Like they set up 9/11 on their own to like go to war in the Middle East to just to create sufficient cause? Is that what it is?
Again, unless you have a full appreciation of the cult and its impact on the imagination of people, it's really hard to understand what their motivations are, right? But once you understand their cult, once you look into secret societies, they really believe they have a religious mandate from God into to remake the world in a certain way that welcomes God to our world, right? So look at artificial intelligence, and like this New Yorker article by Ronan Farrow on Sam Altman, where he interviews some OpenAI researchers, and they say like, "Oh, we're trying to summon demons with AI." Like they're being literal about this. They're not joking about this. They're not being metaphorical. They're being
You don't think that's
literal.
just
They believe.
self-interested to greatly increase the potential impact of AI and how scary it is in an effort to justify all the additional billions of dollars in fundraising? Because there's two different schools of thought on this, right? Many people don't believe that AGI is truly possible, and then there are some who are simply trying to feed the bubble to the best of their ability. And part of that is to say that AI is going to take over everything. It's so scary. And that actually causes a lot of people to pay close attention to it and to continue giving money to it, to continue giving money to the likes of Sam Altman specifically, so they can continue, I guess, trying to develop it to the best of their ability. I do have a question for you. So you said you
Sure.
read the Divine Comedy only 4 years ago. That seems a little far fetched considering that you got an English degree from Yale.
Well, I mean, but the Divine Comedy is in Italian, right? So we read Shakespeare, Milton, Keats, Wordsworth. We were reading English poetry.
So you didn't read
But
Divine
Divine,
Comedy through your English major at Yale?
no, no, no. And Divine Comedy is actually very hard to read. I mean, I read a lot of classics at Yale. I read, Homer and Plato, but we never read the Divine Comedy.
Okay. I mean,
We should have. We
we
should
read it.
have.
We read it in. I think we were. I mean, I read it in Turkey in like eighth grade, I think. But
Right,
I didn't fully
right.
understand it. But then again, I also didn't think that it was like a divine intervention that like was incepted into Dante's brain.
I spent the past 2 weeks teaching Divine Comedy, and I spent every single day trying to tell people this is God's work. This is not Dante. This is the universe taking possession of Dante in order to spread the divine fire to humanity. I just spent the past 2 weeks doing that, and it's on my channel. So
Okay. Um, and you're okay. So you read Divine Comedy, and that just like one shotted you. It one shotted
basically,
your
yes.
mind,
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
somehow ties back to Donald Trump's invasion plans of Iran, and
yeah,
that puts you down this journey. But that happened, uh, that didn't happen 4 years ago, right? That happened
yeah, yeah,
130 days ago is when Donald Trump
yeah.
kickstarted Operation Epic Fury. So the timeline is a little messed up for me. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to.
Okay. All right. So okay. So here's my theory. And again, I could be completely wrong. Okay. But based on my reading of Divine Comedy, this is what I think happened. Okay. There are many Jewish occultists, okay, Kabbalists, okay, who are intent on ushering the end times because they want God to come to earth and to reunite with the Jewish people. Okay. And so one group that is very prominent, very powerful are the Chabad Lubavitch movement, and then Rebbe Sneerson was leader of that movement for many decades. He's obviously passed away, but the thing about Lubavitch is like they are the largest property owners in Brooklyn. Okay, so they bought property way back before World War II, and now they're basically the biggest real estate developer in Brooklyn. And a lot of people that are in real estate are maybe front people for the Chabad Lubavitch movement, including like the Kushner family, right? And Donald Trump would obviously have had dealings with Chabad Lubavitch. They're not interested in the mature world. They don't care about that. What they're interested in is fulfilling their end times prophecy. There are three major pillars to the end times prophecy. The first is the completion of the Greater Israel Project, right? Second is the return of the Jewish diaspora to Jerusalem. They want all Jews to return to Israel, and they're fanatical about it. They're very serious about it. And the third is the building of the third temple, because that is where God will live. Okay, so if you just go into the Chabad Lubavitch movement, they're fanatical about these three objectives, and for decades they were planning this. Now, the thing about these religious Jews is they spend all their time meditating on the Torah. You know, they
Wait,
recite the
Professor Jiang,
Torah.
before we move on, I have to ask you some
Right,
questions
right.
here. So you're
Okay.
saying the Chabad Lubavitch movement predates Zionism as an ideology, and that it was actually a foundational ideology before Zionism, pre Theodore Herzl, pre Jabotinsky, and the like, and that they are responsible for Zionism as a prominent ideology, as a settler colonial ideology.
Okay. So let's be precise. Um, so after the Protestant Reformation, um, the idea there were many different groups, including the Freemasons, including the Sabbatean Frankists, many different groups who are interested in the second coming of Jesus. Okay, um, people like Isaac Newton thought that you now that you have direct access to the Bible is a divine plan because the Bible is literally the Word of God, right? And if you read the Bible in a certain way, right, if you focus on the books of Daniel, the books of Ezekiel, and the book of Revelation, this divine plan is going to reveal itself to you. And this divine plan calls for all three things, okay? So it's not just the Chabad Lubavitch people, it's also a lot of Freemasons, a lot of different secret societies. They believe that for God to return, you need to meet certain conditions. And again, this is a fringe group of people, but unfortunately, this fringe group of people tend to have all the power in the world. Okay, so
I mean, I don't know if that's the case. Like, I mean,
okay,
I think Zionism is broadly speaking a fairly dominant ideology amongst a lot of evangelical Christians, and certainly many American or Western Jews as well. But having said that, I don't know if it's I don't. Not even that I don't know. I don't believe that this is a foundational ideology that predates the inception of Zionism itself under the likes of Theodore Herzl. There was plenty of discourse around it when it first was being discussed. Many Jews were against it. As a matter of fact, Jews were primarily against it, both for
sure,
theological justifications, different sects of Judaism that understood it as what's I don't know what the term would be in Judaism, but heretical, right? As in
yes, absolutely,
that Jews are not supposed to maintain a nation state
absolutely,
before the return of
absolutely,
the Messiah. And then there were plenty of Jews who were just basically secular, even though Theodore Herzl and many of the other founding fathers of Israel were also secular themselves. But there was the Bundist movement that was anti-fascist and therefore opposed any kind of settler colonial enterprise, such as what Zionism would bring about. So I don't know if I don't know if that would be a guiding principle. And I also certainly don't believe that the groups that were able to purchase real estate in Brooklyn are the most powerful financial force in American politics, let alone global politics. I mean, it's just Brooklyn
right,
real estate.
right, okay. So again, you're absolutely right. These points you bring up are absolutely correct. Okay, point one is that Zionism in the year 1900, when Theodor Herzl was active, it was a very fringe thing. Only about 1% of all Jews around the world support the idea of like let's pack our bags, leave our middle class life in England and America, and go to a desert in the middle of nowhere. Like 1% of Jews actually believe this, and you're absolutely right in
It's
that.
before the
Uh,
1900s, even. It's like late 1800s, I think.
yeah, so I think Theodore Herzl, his book Judenland was published in the year 1899.
Yeah.
Um, so at this point in history, the idea of return to Jewish homeland, Jerusalem, it is not popular. But as you point out, the other issue is that it is heretical, right? Because the very basis of Zionism, Christian Zionism is that you can actually manipulate history, and that goes against God's will, right? It is God's will that the Jews be dispersed around the world because of their sins, because of their lack of faith in God. And when God has chosen the Jews already, then he will send a Messiah to take them back to the promised land. Okay, that's the order of things. And so the priority for Jews is to practice a life of piety, a life of goodness, a life of generosity. And then when God is ready, then the Messiah will come. Okay, that's what most Jews believe.
Okay,
But my
quick question for you, actually. I don't know how many Jewish friends you have, but at least maybe in the spaces that I occupy, they don't believe any of that shit. As a matter of fact, for the
right,
most part, most Jews that I know at least are, they're atheists. They say they're Jewish. They may have, attended a couple dinners every now and then, but for the most part, they're just, they're chill about this sort of stuff. So I don't like a lot of
yeah,
Jews are secular. I don't think they believe
yeah.
any of this stuff. So I don't know if we're
I went to Yale. I went to Yale, so I didn't know a lot of Jewish people.
and
But
so the Jewish people that you met in Yale, they were like, this is what we're about. We got to live a life of piety.
no. They were secular. They were
Yeah.
extremely
Okay.
intelligent. They were very open-minded. They were very cosmopolitan. They were secular. I don't recall meeting any religious Jews. But what I've learned is this. Okay, you have about 1 million people. You actually don't need that many people in order to create a movement that has a direct influence on geopolitics. If only 1% of these 1 million people decide, you know what, we really believe in something fanatically, and we're willing to sacrifice our lives in order to achieve our goal, and we're willing to pour resources, and we're willing to spend the rest of our lives doing this. And not only that, but we're willing to indoctrinate our children to complete our mission and our grandchildren to complete this mission over the course of 100 years. Well, this 1% is going to have a lot of influence in finance, a lot of influence in business, a lot of influence in politics and geopolitics.
So you
Okay,
think
so
it's
that
the
like
Chabad Lubavitch guys that have a lot of influence in finance? It's not just like even if because the common trope is there's a lot of Jewish people in positions of power, right? And in the field of
yeah.
finance and whatnot. I don't think any of those guys are a part of Chabad Lubavitch, or maybe some might be, but by and large, I think like there are some who are Zionists, some who have varying degrees of interest in like defending Israel's interests, but for the most part, they have their own self interest. From my perspective, it's regardless of what someone's religious background is maintaining their class position, right?
Okay.
Jewish, Christian doesn't matter. That's the way I interpret the world, at least, right?
Okay. All right. So there are certain things about Donald
Because
Trump.
I don't think Hasidic Jews run finance, is what I'm saying. That would be
Right.
a shock to me.
Right. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying like, Chabad Lubavitch, they run everything. Okay. But, um, but okay. This is like really complicated. So let me go step by step. Okay. Chabad Lubavitch, they're interested in religious meditation. They're interested in mysticism. Okay. They're interested in ideas. And so they focus all their energies on certain on meditation, okay? And what they want, what they pray for is, of course, the coming of the Messiah and the return of the Jews to Jerusalem and to be one with God. And if we believe the universe is pure energy, if we believe the universe is conscious, then these ideas would be uploaded to the universal subconscious. Okay, does that make sense? Because
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, but I'm listening. I'm open minded.
okay, right, but I want
Like
to make sure the
I don't
logic is
believe
clear,
we're all
okay?
uploading our energy into a collective
Right,
consciousness
okay.
or
But,
anything
but
like
I'm saying
that.
let's just work with that, okay? So, through the meditation of thousands of people over decades, there are certain ideas that are embedded now in the universal subconscious. But as you're uploading, you're also downloading as well, right? And as you
Mm-hmm.
download, you get a pretty broad schematic understanding of the course of this universe, okay? And you appreciate certain geopolitical movements. For example, that the United States will win World War II and establish Pax Americana. For example, the Soviet Union would rise to challenge the United States. For example, the rise of China, okay? Like you could like what I do, if through enough concentration, appreciate how these events would unfold over time. Well, if you know this is going to happen, this is great for people who work in business and in finance, right? Because it allows them to make better business decisions. And so they're attracted to your movement, not because they are religious zealots, because they're like, wow, this is a great way for me to make more money for myself, right?
So wait,
Because
hold on.
as
So let me
yes,
get this clear. So you're saying that there are people, right? Jews,
yes,
non-Jews, in positions of
yes,
power, and they find themselves attracted to this way of thinking, represented by Chabad Lubavitch, because they think hard and they meditate and they unlock the download and the upload that you're getting, because this allows them to make better market decisions and make more money.
that's right, right? So